My name is Clarissa Monroe. I'm 43 years old, and I raised the girl who betrayed me, not by accident, not in passing. I raised her like my own. I tucked her into bed when her own mother couldn't be bothered to call. I taught her how to braid her hair, pick herself up after heartbreak, and make her voice heard. And she used that same voice to moan my husband's name when she thought I wasn't home. It was a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had left that morning for a weekend yoga retreat in Sedona, a trip I had planned for months to escape the tension between me and David, my husband of 19 years, the man I thought I'd grow old beside. The man who had grown so cold I no longer recognized the way he looked at me, but I never imagined where that distance would lead. Halfway to the retreat, I had to turn back. A landslide blocked the only open road, and traffic rerouted us for hours. I sighed, called the resort to reschedule, and made the quiet 2-hour drive home. I didn't even text David to let him know I was coming back. I thought maybe, just maybe, a surprise evening together would rekindle something. The way it used to be, but what I walked into wasn't love. It was betrayal in its most grotesque form. I parked in the driveway and immediately noticed something was off. The windows were closed, the house unusually silent, blinds drawn in the middle of the afternoon. David's car was there, so was Sarah's, my stepdaughter, 22, with long black hair and the kind of careless beauty only girls with no conscience wear like perfume. I thought she was visiting. She still had a key. I walked in slowly, the floor creaking under my heels. No one greeted me, not even our dog, Scout, who usually ran to the door. Then I heard it. Soft laughter from the living room. I froze. The tone wasn't daughterly. It was flirtatious, unfiltered. Then David's voice, deep, amused, and low. I tiptoed to the edge of the hall, and through the crack between the doorway and the wall, I saw them. Her legs were draped over his lap. Her hands under his shirt, his lips brushing her collarbone. They weren't just kissing. They weren't just touching. They were in a world so indecent, so far removed from morality. I could have screamed, and they still wouldn't have noticed me. My body locked, my stomach flipped, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't burst into the room like the shattered woman I was. I stepped back silently, slowly, like a ghost watching her own funeral. I went to the kitchen, opened a bottle of wine, and poured myself a glass with trembling fingers. I sat at the table, and I waited. 15 minutes passed before David appeared, startled, shirt halfway on, Sarah trailing behind with wide eyes like a child caught shoplifting. Except this wasn't a store. This was my life. Clarissa, he started, stammering. I held up one hand. Don't. I said quietly, not a word. Sarah opened her mouth, but I looked at her once, and whatever lie she was about to spit dried on her tongue. She backed out of the room, face burning. David sat down across from me. It's not what it looked like. He lied, eyes shifting, hands twitching. It just happened. I don't even know how. You were inside her, David. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Please, it's not what you think. No. I smiled, bitter and hollow. You accidentally tripped and landed in my stepdaughter's bed. He begged. He cried. He said he was confused, lonely. He blamed our marriage. He even tried to blame me. Said I'd become cold, that I hadn't touched him in weeks, that he felt unloved. But nothing justified this. Not the distance. Not the silence between us. Not his twisted desire for the girl I once called daughter. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom. He slept, if he slept, in the den. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask for the truth, because the truth was already spread across our living room couch like a filthy secret neither of them had bothered to hide. The next morning, he asked if we could talk. I want a divorce. I said before he could open his mouth. He looked stunned. What? No, Clarissa, please. We can fix this. I'm not interested in fixing anything. I replied. Sign the papers, or I'll make sure everyone in this town knows what you've done. He went pale. Sarah didn't even have the courage to show her face again. But I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it. Something inside me whispered that this betrayal ran deeper than one night, that this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice they had made behind my back, in my house, on my furniture, with the same mouth she used to call me Mom. I started watching. Every move, every excuse. I installed trackers, dug into phone records. I saw dinners they lied about, hotel receipts they tried to delete, and messages I can never unread. But I didn't confront them. Because I wasn't done bleeding yet, and when I finally stood up from the ashes of my pride and my marriage, I smiled because I knew the fire wasn't over. It had only just begun. I didn't cry in front of them. Not once. But what they didn't see was how my hands shook every night when I undressed alone in the guest room. How the walls felt like they were closing in. How every plate I touched, every photo frame I dusted, felt like an artifact from a life that had died without warning. David kept trying to apologize, but his eyes weren't sorry. They were frightened of what I knew, frightened of what I might say. He'd betrayed me, yes, but now he was starting to realize the cost. And I wasn't about to give him peace. 2 weeks passed with barely a word between us until I received a message from his sister. "Are you okay? I heard something crazy." I didn't reply, but I should have known. Word was spreading, and not the truth, because Sarah wasn't hiding in shame. She was building a story. I found out exactly how bad it was at my niece's birthday party. I went alone. David wasn't invited, and almost everyone treated me like glass. That awkward silence, the way people looked at me and quickly looked away. And then I overheard 2 women whispering behind me, not realizing I was just around the corner. Clarissa's always been jealous of that girl. You know, she never had kids of her own. I heard Sarah said she made the first move and David tried to tell her no. Well, Clarissa was always cold to him. He probably felt neglected. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. They believed her. They believed them. They weren't calling Sarah a homewrecker. They were calling her the victim. The narrative had twisted, and I hadn't even opened my mouth. Sarah had told people I bullied her, that I was controlling, cruel, manipulative, that David and I had been separated for months, and she only fell for him after the marriage was dead. It was a lie so sickening I couldn't breathe, but the worst part, David wasn't correcting it. He let her cry to relatives. He let her paint me as this icy, bitter stepmother who never truly accepted her. He let me become the villain in my own story, and that's when I knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. Sarah wasn't ashamed. She was hungry for attention, for sympathy, for the drama of it all. And David, weak and spineless, was clinging to her narrative because it made his betrayal seem noble instead of vile. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to ignore it. But the moment my best friend Monica called and said, "I don't know what's going on, but people are starting to say you're the one who cheated," I knew I had to shift gears. But not loudly, not yet. I began documenting everything, screenshots, texts, call logs. I reopened the GPS trackers on David's phone, and sure enough, he was still meeting Sarah in secret places, even though they pretended to be apart for everyone's sake. I recorded the whispered phone call he made in the kitchen. "I know, baby. We just have to ride it out. She'll give in eventually." He didn't even say my name. And Sarah, she made her next move boldly. She uploaded a photo of the 2 of them, laughing at her restaurant, captioned, "Sometimes love finds you in the worst places." The comments were nauseating. "So brave. You deserve to be happy. Ignore the haters, girl. Follow your heart." I realized then they weren't hiding because of shame. They were hiding because they needed me silent. They needed me to remain dignified, to look like the uptight woman they claimed I was, because the moment I cracked, the whole illusion might fall, so I stayed silent. On the outside, but inside, I was building a case. I began looking at them like a lawyer, not a wife. Every post she made was time-stamped. Every photo they shared had metadata. I downloaded it all. I pulled bank statements, cross-checked restaurant bills with Sarah's tagged Instagram posts, and marked every overlap. There were dozens, all during times when we were still together, times they swore they weren't involved. I even contacted an old friend of Sarah's from college who had commented on her recent photo. When I explained who I was, she got quiet and said, "Look, I don't want to get involved, but Sarah told me about your husband months ago. I thought you already knew." Months. Not weeks, not after the separation. They had been lying from the beginning. But I didn't explode. Instead, I smiled politely at the next family event. I listened while Sarah clutched David's arm and pretended to be a woman caught in a whirlwind of scandal she never asked for. I let them hug each other tightly like some kind of tragic Romeo and Juliet. And then, behind my back, the final blow came. David filed for divorce, no conversation, no discussion, just a courier delivering papers to my doorstep like I was a stranger. He was divorcing me, and I let him. People whispered, "Poor Clarissa, she's breaking down." But I wasn't breaking. I was watching, waiting, counting down the days because this wasn't over. They thought they'd won. But the truth, they had just handed me the knife, and I was about to twist it exactly where it would hurt the most. Letting David divorce me wasn't surrender, it was strategy. From the outside, it may have looked like I'd been broken, humiliated, tossed aside like some bitter ex-wife watching her younger replacement step into the spotlight. That's what they wanted everyone to see. But I let him go because I needed him to believe he'd won. I needed them both to feel safe, secure, smug, because people like David and Sarah don't reveal their darkest truths when they're cornered. They do it when they think no one's watching. The day the divorce papers arrived, couriered to my door like a package I hadn't ordered, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I sat on my porch, pen in hand, and signed every page while the sun set behind me. It was almost poetic, my marriage dying quietly in the same house where we'd built birthdays, Christmases, anniversaries, and where he'd destroyed it all with the girl I raised. I handed the envelope back to the courier and said calmly, "Tell him I wish him well." The man nodded, probably thinking I was either heartless or in shock. Maybe I was both, but behind my eyes a fire had started, not one of rage or chaos, but of clarity, because now there were no more blurred lines. No more questions. I had let go of the title of wife, but what I had gained was far more dangerous freedom. For the first time in 19 years, I had nothing to lose. I knew the wedding was coming. Sarah was too much of a showgirl to keep anything low-key. Sure enough, not 2 months after the divorce finalized, they got engaged. She uploaded a photo of her ring, gaudy, oversized, obnoxiously captioned, "Never expected this, but love always wins what exactly?" A husband who cheats with his stepdaughter, a life built on lies and seduction. The post got hundreds of likes, most from her friends, many from mutual family members who had chosen to believe her version of the story. The betrayal stung like vinegar in a wound, but I kept quiet. I needed the silence to let them build their narrative. Every lie they posted, every comment they made, it was all evidence, it was all fuel. David, meanwhile, didn't try to speak to me again, not once. He moved into Sarah's condo within 3 weeks of the divorce. I knew because I still had access to our shared Amazon account, and I saw the purchases: a new mattress, blackout curtains, $1.03, 100 espresso machine, things he once argued we couldn't afford when I wanted to redecorate our guest room. The man who once flinched at my request for a weekend getaway was now buying designer robes and massage candles for her, but I didn't rage. I documented, I screened, captured every post, every receipt, every hint of their relationship's timeline. I tracked overlaps, flagged contradictions, and even set up Google alerts for both their names. Anything they did publicly would land right in my inbox. If Sarah so much as sneezed near a news article, I would know. Then came the real kicker. They invited people to the wedding, not quietly, not shamefully. They sent out embossed gold invitations as if their entire relationship hadn't started in the shadows of betrayal. And guess what? My name was on the list. Clarissa Monroe RSVP by March 3rd. My hands actually trembled holding it. I wasn't being invited out of kindness. I was being paraded. They wanted me to see it. To stand in the back row like some washed-up relic, watching them pretend they were the victims of a love story the world couldn't understand. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted validation. I didn't RSVP. I didn't attend, but I sent a gift, not flowers, not a toaster. I sent them silence, and it was deafening. The day of their wedding, I left town, drove 3 hours north to a tiny lakeside area. I watched the sunrise, lit a fire, and sat with a journal in my lap and a photo of my mother in my hand. She used to say, "Don't fight in the mud with pigs. baby. Just make sure the pen collapses when they're asleep in it. That weekend, I made my decision. If they wanted to be married, so be it, but they were going to be married to the truth. So I started preparing for war. I hired a private investigator, a good one, quiet, discreet, ex-military, and, most importantly, a woman. She understood exactly what kind of men we were dealing with. She dug deep into David's finances, Sarah's employment records, even her college days. What she found wasn't shocking, but it was useful. Turns out Sarah had a pattern. There were 2 older professors she'd grown close to during college. One of them had resigned after a sexual misconduct complaint. Nothing was proven, but the timing matched too closely to be coincidence. Her transcripts were full of late drops, grade appeals, and letters pleading for exceptions. She wasn't some sweet, confused girl caught in a whirlwind romance. She was calculated. As for David, the PI uncovered a secret savings account. Opened 6 months before we separated. Guess whose name was on the secondary card? Sarah's. They had been planning their escape for a long time. Still, I didn't expose them. Not yet. I waited, because the best kind of revenge isn't rushed. It's choreographed. In the meantime, I reinvented myself. I colored my hair, lost 10 pounds, got back into painting, reconnected with old friends who had been pushed aside during my marriage. I stopped being David's wife and started being Clarissa again. The more I glowed, the more it unnerved them. I could see it in their photos, forced smiles, Sarah's captions becoming passive, aggressive, things like, "You can't ruin our peace unless we let you," or "We're so lucky to be surrounded by love, even when others wish us harm." It was obvious. They were scared because I hadn't snapped. They kept expecting an explosion, a bitter Facebook rant, a drunken phone call, something to prove I was the woman they painted me to be, but I gave them nothing. Because while they were planning a wedding, I was planning ruin. And once I had every piece of the puzzle, every document, message, timeline, and contradiction, I contacted someone who would soon become my greatest ally, a producer. Not just any producer, one who had worked on a popular daytime talk show known for exposing scandal, betrayal, and dramatic family breakdowns. And the best part, Sarah had already reached out to them a year earlier, trying to pitch herself as a guest. What she didn't know was, now I had a better story, a real one backed by proof, and she had no idea what was coming. The key to taking someone down isn't brute force. It's intimacy. You get close enough to hear their heartbeat, and when you squeeze, they don't even realize they're bleeding until it's too late. After the wedding, I waited. I didn't text, didn't call, didn't so much as blink in their direction. To the world, it looked like I had moved on. Clarissa Monroe, newly divorced, quietly rebuilding her life. But behind every polite smile and calm Instagram post, I was working, studying, watching the walls they thought they'd built around their secret. I was already slipping between the cracks, but I needed one more piece. Someone from inside. Someone who had witnessed the ugly parts of their love story, not the filtered photos or the obnoxious couple selfies. I needed the raw stuff, the nights they fought, the nights he drank too much and she cried in the bathroom, the things they whispered when they thought no one could hear. And then, one day, the opportunity arrived wearing platform heels and red lipstick. Her name was Tasha. She had been Sarah's best friend since college, or more accurately, her occasional best friend. Sarah didn't keep friends long. She collected people the way children collect dolls, admired, played with, then discarded. But Tasha had something most didn't, survival instincts. She knew how to play along without being devoured. When Sarah married David, Tasha stayed close enough to sip champagne, but far enough not to get blamed if it all exploded. I ran into her accidentally on purpose at an art gallery downtown. I was alone, browsing oil paintings, pretending to care about a portrait of a dying sunflower when I heard her voice behind me. Clarissa? Her tone was surprised but curious, not cold. I turned, offered a smile. Tasha, wow, it's been years. We hugged. It was brief, tense, the kind of hug 2 women give when they both know they're circling the same bonfire. We chatted about the art, the wine, the new Thai place down the street. Then I leaned in, tilted my head just right, and asked, "How's married life treating Sarah and David?" She paused, just for a second, a flicker of hesitation. It was enough. "Oh, you know," she said casually, "they're trying. Not thriving, not happy, not perfect, trying." And just like that, I had her. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee, drinks, yoga classes neither of us cared about. We spoke about everything and nothing. I told her about my divorce, carefully omitting the venom. I painted myself as the gracious ex-wife who was finally at peace. Tasha ate it up, or maybe she recognized something in me, a woman no longer in mourning. But on a mission, it didn't take long before the truth started spilling out. Oh my God, if you heard the way she talks about him sometimes. She said one night over cocktails, "You'd think she was married to a chore, not a man." I smiled gently. "Really, she gets bored, that's her thing. She thrives on chaos. When you and David were married, she used to say the best part of coming over was the drama she imagined when she left. That stung." I masked it with a sip of my drink. "What kind of things did she say?" I asked, carefully casual. Tasha exhaled. "She'd tell me stuff like, if Clarissa ever found out, I'd just cry and say she was always cruel to me. Like she had it all rehearsed." I froze. "She admitted that?" I asked softly. Tasha nodded. "She said David wouldn't defend you, that he wanted out anyway. There it was, proof, not just that the affair happened, but that it was premeditated. They hadn't fallen into love. They'd planned it like a prison break." I leaned back, heart thundering beneath my ribs, but I smiled sweetly. "Tasha, has anyone else heard this?" She shook her head. "No, Sarah thought she could trust me, but honestly, I'm over her. The wedding was a nightmare. She made her maid of honor cry, and Doug, he's like a mannequin now. Dead eyes, no spark." She was venting, but she was also unraveling the truth, one thread at a time. I waited a few more days before I asked for what I really needed. "Do you still have any of the messages?" I asked during our fourth brunch. Tasha blinked. "You mean, like texts, anything, screenshots, voicemails? I just need to know if there's proof, not for revenge, just for clarity." She hesitated. Then she said, "I'll check." 2 days later, I received a Dropbox link. Inside, over 150 screenshots, text chains where Sarah bragged about seducing Daddy David, photos of expensive gifts she called guilt presents, even a video where she drunkenly confessed to sleeping with him while Clarissa was in the house baking banana bread. I watched that one 3 times. I memorized her face, her smirk, her satisfaction. Then I saved it all securely, redundantly, secretly. The final nail came a week later. Tasha invited me to a podcast taping Sarah had planned. Apparently, Sarah and David were trying to build their brand. They wanted to be one of those couples who gave relationship advice. Ironically, the podcast was small, run by a friend of theirs. It hadn't aired yet, but Tasha had access to the raw files. She sent me a clip. David, voice smug and confident, said, "People don't get it. Love isn't about rules. It's about timing. Sarah came into my life when I was already disconnected from Clarissa. It wasn't cheating. It was liberation. Liberation." I nearly dropped my phone. He didn't just admit it. He justified it, on tape, on record. I now had everything I needed. Tasha watched me carefully after I received the files. "So, what now?" I looked at her, truly looked at her. She hadn't betrayed Sarah for me. She'd done it because she was tired of being discarded. "What now?" I repeated. A slow, cold smile curled on my lips. "Now, we let the world decide who they really are. There's a unique kind of power in knowing something the world doesn't, yet. It simmers beneath your skin like electricity, sharpens your breath, and turns every polite smile into a loaded weapon." I had waited months for this moment, months pretending to move on, months watching David and Sarah parade themselves around like some unbothered, unconventional love story. Husband marries stepdaughter, tabloid bait, social media wildfire, and somehow they were starting to rebrand it as fate, but not for long, because the story they were telling the world was missing one crucial detail, me. And now I wasn't just going to add myself back in. I was going to make sure I was the headline. The documents Tasha had given me weren't just juicy, they were a timeline, a blueprint of betrayal. I mapped out the affair like a crime scene investigator. Texts from 2 years ago, when Sarah was still calling me Mom. Photos from our last family vacation, where David had his arm around me while texting her on the side. And that drunken video where she cackled about stealing Daddy right from under Clarissa's nose. They didn't just cheat. They conspired, so I got to work. I started by creating a folder, anonymous, encrypted, and watermarked. Inside it, screenshots, dated messages, short clips, calendar entries, and receipts from hotels I hadn't even known he'd visited. I wrote a short, cold preface, just 300 words, enough to lay out the betrayal and the fact that the affair began while Sarah was still a minor under my guardianship. I didn't embellish it. I didn't need to. The truth was enough to curdle milk. Then I made 3 moves, each one designed to fracture their world in a different way. 1. The anonymous blog leak. I created a blog under a pseudonym, Stepmother Scorned. I uploaded the full timeline there with redacted names, but clear enough that anyone who followed them, even loosely, would know exactly who it was about. The blog post was carefully written, part confession, part expose. It opened with a line that made readers stop cold. I baked cookies in the kitchen while my husband slept with the girl I raised in the room upstairs. By the time I hit publish, I'd also scheduled 100 automated Twitter/X posts from bot accounts, each linking back to the blog with captions like, "That influencer couple you love, they met while he was still married, and she was still calling his wife Mom." New post reveals disturbing truth behind this internet famous couple. Buckle up. Within hours, it was viral. The blog hit 500K views by midnight. Reddit picked it up next. Subreddits like r/true off my chest and r/marriage exploded. Thousands of comments, theories, accusations. Some users even began investigating on their own. Matching tattoos, photos, even the artwork in the background of old family pictures, too. The email to the sponsors next. I sent private packages to the brands that had started working with Sarah and David. They just landed a partnership with a fitness company and were promoting it hard online, claiming their healthy relationship was key to their success. I found the company's PR team email and sent them a file marked urgent, public image risk David and Sarah Monroe. Inside, my entire dossier, a private letter explaining the affair's timeline, and direct links to now viral blog posts. I didn't threaten, I didn't beg, I simply presented facts. This is not a couple that exemplifies trust, integrity, or mental well-being. Please consider the impact on your audience. By the next morning, the company had pulled their sponsorship. By that evening, 2 others followed. 3, the public comment that lit the match finally. I used my real name just once, just one comment on one of their posts. They had shared a cute, overly-filtered photo titled, "We fought for this love. Haters don't scare us." And underneath it, I commented, "Did you fight for it while I was still doing your laundry and making his dinner, or just after you turned 18? The comment had 32K likes within 4 hours. It was screenshotted, reposted, and dissected. People were digging through Sarah's old profiles, finding posts of us together, Mother's Day tributes, birthday parties, pictures from the day I taught her to drive. One by one, the public started connecting the dots I had laid out. And the tide turned fast. The podcast they had planned, pulled, the YouTube launch, postponed indefinitely, the wedding video that had won. 2 million views, deleted, but the internet never forgets. Clips circulated like wildfire, particularly the one where David claimed he wasn't cheating, just liberated. That one became a meme. People layered clown music over it, duetted it with reactions, and tagged Sarah in every post. Her DMs leaked, his inbox flooded. They both went dark on social media 3 days later, and yet I wasn't done, because the biggest blow was still coming. A week after the initial leak, I received a message on LinkedIn from a television producer. She worked for a daytime talk show known for family drama episodes, cheaters being confronted, secret affairs exposed, and viral moments aired to millions. She had seen the blog. She wanted to talk. "We've got David and Sarah scheduled next month," she said. "They were booked before this all exploded. I don't suppose you'd be willing to share what you know." I didn't answer right away. I let her wait. Then I sent her the entire package, edited, and asked just one question: "Can I be in the audience?" There's a special kind of silence right before public humiliation unfolds. It's not empty. It's charged, like the air before a lightning strike. I felt that silence hum through me as I sat in the front row of the brightly lit studio, legs crossed, hands steady, my expression unreadable beneath the flawless makeup I had taken my sweet time applying that morning. Because today wasn't just another taping of the Helen Carter show. It was my finale. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation. No one knew exactly why they'd been called for a special love and controversy segment. They were told a newlywed couple was coming forward to talk about overcoming public judgment. Viewers thought they were about to witness a redemption arc, a misunderstood couple defending their love. The producers let them believe that because the twist wouldn't land unless it hit everyone at once. Even David and Sarah thought they were about to be praised. I watched them walk onto the stage, holding hands like soulmates, dressed in coordinated pastel tones that made my stomach twist, not from hurt, but from anticipation. Sarah wore a smug little smile, her hair curled just so, and David had his arm around her waist like he was daring the world to challenge them again. They sat on the love seat, the lights softened, the music faded. Then Helen Carter, polished and poised as ever, leaned forward with her signature empathetic gaze. "So, David, Sarah, you've caused quite a stir lately." She began, voice warm but measured, a lot of judgment online, a lot of speculation. "Tell us, what's the truth behind the headlines?" David chuckled, that same cocky, dismissive laugh I used to hear when he thought he was getting away with something. "The truth is, we fell in love," he said. "It was unexpected, but love doesn't follow rules." Sarah nodded, playing the blushing bride. "We didn't mean for it to happen, but we were both hurting, and we found each other." Cue audience awe. Cue the soft piano music in the background. Helen smiled, nodding thoughtfully. "Some would say the timing of your relationship is questionable." Sarah's face twitched. "Just slightly. David took the lead. We've addressed that. Our relationship started after my divorce. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't scandalous. People just love to gossip." Helen tilted her head, and then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "I want to play something," she said, turning to the screen behind them. Just to give our viewers full context, the screen lit up, no warning, no transition. The first thing that played was a clip from a home video me, Sarah, and David at Christmas 3 years ago. I was pouring eggnog, David had his arm around me, and Sarah was sitting beside me in matching pajamas, calling me Mom. The timestamp was clear. Then came the text messages, dozens of them, spanning nearly 2 years. Some flirtatious, some explicit, all clearly marked with dates that overlapped my marriage. Then the video clip I knew would shatter their entire act, the one Tasha had recorded at a party. Sarah, tipsy and laughing, boasting to a friend. She had no idea. I used to call him Dad and sneak into his bed 2 nights later. Clarissa thought we were just close because I was hurting. Guess I was. Just not in the way she thought. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone near me muttered, "Oh my God." Another said, "That's disgusting." On stage, Sarah froze. David's face drained of color. Helen didn't flinch. "David," she said calmly, "can you explain the timeline here?" He stuttered. Fumbled this is out of context. We were separated by then and no. Helen cut in, voice suddenly firm. "You weren't. In fact, your divorce filing came 3 months after these texts." She turned to Sarah. "You called Clarissa your mother figure. You were under her guardianship for years, and you started an affair with her husband while still living in her home. Do you feel that's appropriate behavior?" Sarah's mouth opened. No words came. Helen continued. "We spoke to Clarissa. She provided these documents and messages. She's here today." And then the camera panned to me. There I was sitting front row, wearing the same calm, composed face I'd worn while baking dinner for a man who was sleeping with my stepdaughter upstairs. The audience burst into gasps, whispers, some even clapped. David's head whipped around. His eyes met mine. For a second, just a second, I saw the old expression he used to wear when he realized I'd outsmarted him. Confused, then fearful, then furious, but I didn't blink. Sarah stood. "This is a setup. This is a trap." Helen raised a hand. "No, Sarah, this is clarity, and it's long overdue." David tried to walk off set, but producers blocked the side exits. The contract he'd signed allowed for editorial redirection. They couldn't force him to sit, but they could force him to hear the rest. The final nail came when Helen read aloud their shared bank statements, the ones showing they were using money from my alimony and the house sale to fund their wedding and social media campaigns. Oh, and one more thing, she added. Several brands you've worked with have dropped you following this information. Your recent podcast deal, it's canceled. Your wedding video, removed from YouTube due to community guidelines. It seems your love story is costing you more than expected. Sarah collapsed onto the love seat, pale and shaking. David just stood there, jaw clenched, blinking in shock. And I sat there like a queen at her coronation, because I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged. I hadn't ruined their lives with fists or fire. I'd used the truth, patiently, strategically, completely, and now, under the hottest lights, on the most public stage, they were watching it all fall apart, while I smiled, untouched, unbothered, untouchable. After the show, Helen shook my hand backstage. You didn't just take your power back, she said. You redefined it. I nodded, calm and quiet, because power isn't in the moment you destroy someone. It's in the moment you no longer need them to feel whole.